Welcome to what is probably an Idiots of the Round Table video, but if that concept gets rejected, this will go on my personal channel because it's a video I want to do regardless. Anyway, Pokemon randomizations were pretty popular just a few years ago. I'm a little late on the bandwagon, but something that I wanted to do was play them on a physical card. And that seems like something other people might want to do as well. So, well, how do you do that? Not everyone likes emulators. Some people may prefer to have it on the go. Plus, some people, even if you have a phone, touchscreen, just not the same as physical buttons all the time. And you may want to play it on your TV. You have the Gameboy Player, but you can't do that through emulation. So, and it's just easier through the Gameboy Player as well with these specific games. So this can apply to other things with Pokemon and Game Boy Advance, but we're going to focus mainly on Pokemon randomizations. How do you get it onto a physical card? Let's start with the materials needed. You will need the Pokemon game. You want to randomize. Oops. You'll need the Pokemon game you want to randomize. You may not necessarily need a physical card if you can find the ROM file online, but I'd highly recommend, because of the other materials you need, you can just pull the game off of this. It's a lot safer. You don't run the risk of viruses. You also need a bootleg card. This is a bootleg Fire Red. I did that because I just happen to have both here. The reason you need this is because you cannot just simply randomize, take the ROM on your computer, put it through the randomization software, which we'll get to later, and then just put it back on here. You can put the save file on there if you play on the emulator. You can write that to this, but the game itself won't be randomized. The randomizer does change game data. That data will remain unchanged in this, regardless of what you do. And so that's why we have the bootleg carts. This allows you to play it, because you can put the game on here. Now, it does not necessarily have to be a bootleg of the exact game. I highly recommend it, especially if you buy from the same place I do, which is the Bin shop, and I'll explain why I buy from them in a minute, but I would highly recommend this just because, at least for the bootleg cart you bought, you will have the ability to save almost certainly, as long as you take a backup of this as well. So you would want to take a backup of this. You wouldn't want to just take one. You'd probably want to save it in case you want to do any future randomizations, things like that. And then you'll want to copy and save this onto a folder onto your computer as well, this bootleg version. The reason you want to do that is because simply taking this and putting it on here won't work. It won't play. You have to change certain game data because of the differences in the circuit boards here. You can find patches online, but they may not necessarily have the right save protocol for your specific bootleg. So if you just get one that already has that built into the ROM on here, you can save yourself some time. You don't have to go learn save protocols and how to edit that in Game Boy Advance games. You can just randomize this ROM instead of the other one, or do a variety of things. So yeah, technically you don't need this if you get the game you want either. I still recommend having it because there are other things you can do that I'll show you when we get to the computer step. The most important piece here, though, is this, which is a reader and writer that is able to connect to a computer. And theoretically, you could connect this to a phone as well. This is the Joy Jr., the USB-C model with the 3D printed top on it, so the circuit board isn't completely exposed. You just plug in your Game Boy Advance game here, plug in using a USB-C to USB-C or USB-C to USB-A. In this case, this is just a Nintendo Switch cable, like your Pro Controller cable. Use that, anything that can connect here, to a digital device that can read the files. And then, because of the general purpose of this, of course, you'll want to have original hardware, whether it's a Game Boy Advance, a DS-Lite, original DS, I guess, too, or a Game Boy Player. And everything I just said also goes for if you want to do the original Game Boy games. Except you will probably need the original cart if you want to do it safely with these, because you may not get that on these original Game Boy bootlegs. And then the other thing you'll need, these don't need batteries, these do. And that's because these don't need batteries, but these do. So you'll want to make sure that the battery's already installed. You can install it yourself, but if you don't have a pretty good knowledge of electronics and soldering, that's going to be a pain. Just spend the extra money to get it with batteries. You'll be able to save your game. It'll also work with non-Pokemon games. I just wanted to mention that. These are going to be harder to find. Already saved patched is the technical term, I guess, of what this has. Already ready to go for a bootleg cart. You may have to find the save protocol and do the manual labor on that yourself if you want to do it with something other than Pokemon. But it is there. You can do it. And the same is also true for ROM hacks. You will absolutely need both of these for a ROM hack, but we're not going to cover that with the computer part. But this is your general materials, what you need, what all you can do with it. Just to reiterate, this is a reader and writer, and so it can read your games, your official games, because these don't have writable storage on them. They are how they are. Nintendo does not let you edit them. All you can do is read them, but you can at least back it up. And then you can both read and write these bootlegs that have writable media on them. With all that said, we can go ahead and move on to the part on the actual computer.
Alright, this is now me in post-production, and you'll see my hands on the camera again, just testing it out. I'm still in post-production voice. Anyway, here we are on the computer. If you haven't already, you'll want to create a folder to put your game saves in, or not the saves, but the files. Dumps, we'll just call them. So when you dump your game onto your computer, you'll want to have a dedicated folder for it. You don't have to, but it just makes things easier when you're organized and know what you need to do. So at this point, I was putting attaching it. So once you make your folder, just go ahead and do. The process will vary for different. Read these cards and connect them to the computer. That said, no flash detected. I'm just kind of showing you that this is the legitimate cart. If you have the Bin Joey Jr., I just showed this. You have to use the auto or GBA mode. I did a little bit too much on the specific thing. This is really meant to be a more general guide, but yeah, you will have to know how to use, how to connect the cartridge and the cartridge reading device, the reader-writer to your computer, and the process on that. So I'm just showing you, this takes a little bit here to write it to the folder on your computer, and so now I cut to where it's done. So now we have the original. I'm creating a new folder instead of trying to rename the other one, because they're just automatically set this by the device, and so I just call it the Nintendo version, the all caps. I don't know, it's because the name of the cartridge was in all caps. So that is our legitimate Nintendo copy. You don't really have to have one of those. I just like it. I get to teach you something else that I kind of like. Generally, it would be easier that if you do have a bootleg cart that already saves with the game you want to randomize on it, to just use that. It'll work just fine. But I'm going to show you, especially because you can use this patch for other things. Here you can see flash detected, the capacity, all that. Again, just showing you this is the bootleg, and we'll copy it over. Back to what I was saying, the patch might come in handy with other things, more particularly ROM hacking if you're making a ROM hack, but you can distribute it to someone else if, say, you have a friend who has bootleg cards but doesn't have the game. They have an official game but they don't have the bootleg cards. You can give that patch to them and it will save it so it can save on at least the bin cards that I use, or if you bought them from a eBay or a different seller, that kind of cart. That's one of the reasons I recommend the bin. I use it partly because I have the Joey Jr., but also I know that those carts are all pretty much the same, so if I patch something on one, I can buy one of those carts and I know that it will save on there. It'll work how it's supposed to. So here we're just creating the patch. You take your original file and then your edited file, and then you save an IPS file, which basically tells this program that this is what needs changed within the game data. And so then when you apply the patch, it goes and changes those automatically for you. You don't have to go into hex editor or anything like that, programming, coding type stuff, and actually change it yourself. It'll just do that for you. And so it just makes the process easier. So now I'm showing you, yes, this will work, support's complete. There's no problems with that. And so we come over here. It's worth mentioning, I forgot to turn on the cursor when I did this. I'm not going to go back and re-record, but yes, you can't see my mouse cursor because I forgot to turn the screen cap settings so that is on. So that's why it looks like nothing's happening. I'm actually going kind of moving the cursor around. You just can't see it. You can maybe kind of see things. Highlight here and there. Regardless, here you go. Now you can see stuff is going to start happening. So you just do your randomization however you want. For this, just because it's easier, you don't have to make any decisions. When I just decided to go totally random, no rules, that's easy because there's no decision making like, do I really want this, do I really want that? I can just go through it for you. Here you go. I didn't randomize the trainer names, trainer deals. I have some randomized. You can set those in the custom names editor. I set some. They're not like raunchy or anything like that, but I didn't really want to super show them off. So I kind of give you a cursory glance of the names list I have. And you can take it seriously. You can do it like me and do it not so seriously. So anyway, we just go ahead. You just do your randomization. I can't help you that much if you don't know how to use the software. It's fairly self-explanatory. You might have to do some trial and error to figure out what specific functions do, but for the most part, it's pretty self-explanatory. And if you hold your cursor over the particular option you're wondering about, it will give you a little tip box that explains it in depth, in more detail anyway. You can also look these things up if you really aren't sure. So it will create a new file. It will not just save over your other one. So just go ahead and rename that when you're done with your randomization. You can close out of that. Now we get to the other part. So since we did this with the non-save patch version, we have to apply our cartridge saving patch. And so we pick the patch and then the ROM, and then we do that. So like I said, that's not a necessary step, but it's one that I want to show off because it might have other uses that you find for it when you know how to do that. And it's something that's simple enough that you really don't need to understand what's going on in the back end to understand how to do it. Now, if you're making a ROM hack or things like that, you'll want to kind of understand the back end of that to some extent, or you probably will anyway. So now here we'll write it. I have to delete it to make space, like I said. Whatever the protocol for your specific reader writer is, just go ahead with that. Show you that it did actually work. It just takes a little while to write. It takes longer to write back to the cartridge than it does to write onto the computer typically, and then we'll just use Visual Boy Advance here. Don't worry about the can't create direct sound. This just proves that it works. It was randomized. I'd recommend doing this before you take the card out, because you can just fix it at the computer. You don't have to eject it again, anything like that. So we eject it, and now it's safe to use. And so over here I'm showing you, yes, it does save. We have UEFI save file. I had more footage of this, but I cut it out because I didn't like how much I was in the frame. And so you can see our starters are Slowbro. No, you can't see it very well. That's just the way it is. I didn't want to hook up a Gameboy Player, and I thought this would be better proof anyway. And so we can take Meryl, shut it off. That's it. Now you have a physical cartridge.